Do you think the world will be like in the second term with President Trump second term? A lot of people
I know what it'll be like if we let her in.
Yeah. Oh, really?
That ain't good.
Yeah.
Miserable track record.
I don't think Kamala will ever hold public office again.
Better not.
I don't think you can come back from. It wasn't that she was outfought. It wasn't that she lost. I think you can certainly lose an election and run a good election and still.
Tyrus and Mel Gibson have just done the unthinkable, and the internet might need a support group after seeing how brutally they roasted Kamala Harris. Picture this: late night comedy colliding with Braveheart as Kamala finds herself caught in the middle of the chaos. Political drama? Not quite. This is absurdity turned up to 11. A perfect storm of Fox News fire and Hollywood fury. Buckle up, because Tyrus and Mel didn't just share opinions, they completely tore apart the Kamala narrative.
Listen to what Mel Gibson just said about Kamala Harris.
She got the IQ of a fence post.
Let's fact check that. Can you point to something in your life that you think was a mistake that you've learned from?
I mean, I've made it.
Greg, the teleprompter went up and they cheered too long. Yeah. And she panicked because all she couldn't remember the connection word. So she panicked. This ain't close, I'm telling you.
Before we get into the madness, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and you'll want front row seats for this. Mel Gibson, who usually steers clear of politics, suddenly jumped into the arena like a man realizing Hollywood scripts aren't nearly as wild as real life. And honestly, listening to Kamala speak can sometimes feel like attending a motivational seminar where the energy's off, but somehow you're still paying extra for the pep talk.
Track record, no policies to speak of.
Yeah. And the border, right?
She got the IQ of a fence post.
It was the cinematic equivalent of flipping a table mid-broadcast. Pure chaos and conviction rolled into one moment. And honestly, the man has a point. This is the same actor who once bellowed at imaginary warriors through the misty hills of Scotland, and now he's looking around asking, what on earth is Kamala doing? That's when you know something's off.
VP Harris, she won't go to the border, probably because she'd rather take the magic school bus to the moon.
You guys are gonna see. You're gonna literally see the craters on the moon with your own eyes. Oh my goodness. With your own eyes, I'm telling you, it is gonna be unbelievable.
With your own eyes.
After years of being told to tone it down, surviving studio outbursts, and weathering Hollywood scandals, Mel has seen it all. If Hollywood were the Wild West, Washington would be its unexpected sequel. And in this circus without a ringmaster, Mel Gibson stands as the lone gunslinger brave enough to call the show for what it really is.
And they range from, if you've ever parented a child, you make lots of.
He starts off by painting a picture. Imagine, he says, the biggest blockbuster ever made is America. But who's directing this supposed epic? According to him, it's Kamala Harris, armed with little more than borrowed enthusiasm, somehow turning the script into a riddle wrapped in confusion. You can almost hear the cheerful soundtrack swelling behind her words, upbeat, yet completely unrelated to what she's saying. Mel watches in disbelief as Kamala seems unfazed by his critique. He compares her leadership to that of a friend who jumps into a story halfway through, insists they understand it, and keeps repeating the same 3 lines with growing conviction. You smile politely, waiting for it all to click, but it never does. His sarcasm hits like a punchline with teeth. At least, he jokes, politicians used to pretend they had a script. Now, Washington feels like an open mic night gone wrong, pure improv on the national stage. Somewhere, an exhausted intern with an empty coffee cup is probably trying to make sense of Kamala's remarks, which sound less like policy and more like deleted TikToks. He's not far off. Every phrase loops back on itself, half mystery, half confusion, and just a dash of accidental poetry.
Block.
I've become friends with school shooters.
When they asked her about the gun,
Yes.
and I got a Glock. What kind?
Yes.
And her answer was,
Yeah.
and Those were invented by nervous white people around black people.
Tyrus, straightforward, blunt, and about as subtle as a refrigerator, isn't holding back either. Silence isn't his thing, and when he speaks up, it's more of a verbal body slam than a polite critique. Watching Kamala's brand of political optimism, he sums it up perfectly. The most expensive stand-up routine in the world, without a single punchline. He sits there shaking his head like a man watching a slow-motion car crash, fully aware he's seen this scene too many times before. To him, Kamala represents that familiar paradox, someone who talks endlessly about living in the moment, yet somehow manages to miss every one of them. When Tyrus gets going, he doesn't stop. He compares her press appearances to weak improv acts, the kind where everyone in the room knows it's going nowhere, but pretends to laugh, hoping someone brave enough will end it so they can leave. What grates on him most isn't the confusion, it's the applause that follows. The kind of hollow cheering people give when someone proudly declares, "Water is wet." Mel, meanwhile, zooms out from his philosopher's perch. "This whole thing," he says, "feels like bad studio politics. The kind where studio heads spend millions trying to convince audiences that a flop is actually genius. That," he explains, "is Washington in a nutshell. PR over principle. The problem? America's no longer buying the ticket."
Set social media on fire with his blistering assessment of Kamala Harris. He said she has an appalling track record, no policies to speak of, and she's got the IQ of a fence post. Is Mel Gibson too big to be cancelled? Does he even care? He produces his own stuff these days, doesn't he?
He also financially and emotionally supported Robert Downey Jr. when he was dealing with his addiction problems.
And honestly, he's not wrong. Every time Kamala steps up to a microphone, half the nation watches like it's a live comedy sketch that could go off script at any second. No one knows what's coming. Confusion, laughter, or both. And because he's Mel Gibson, he doesn't soften the blow. He frames it as a dark comedy where the emperor clearly shows up in pajamas, yet everyone insists she's wearing Armani. Tyrus, on the other hand, aims straight for the gut. He calls it the Kamala paradox. She's somehow everywhere and nowhere at once. Her name dominates the headlines, yet no one can quite explain what she's actually doing. The humor cuts deep because it's true, especially when her speeches start sounding like leftover greeting card slogans stitched together with glitter glue and optimism. Mel takes it a notch further, arguing that the real issue isn't Kamala herself, but the script, or lack thereof, that she's working from. Somewhere in the White House, he jokes, there's a dusty teleprompter responsible for half the confusion. He calls it bureaucratic improv theater, where success depends not on skill or substance, but on timing, charm, and the ability to smile convincingly through the chaos.
Worst things that you can say to people.
Yeah.
But I help people who harm people. God bless, good night, that's my time. That's what.
Tyrus doesn't let her off the hook either. He compares Kamala's political rise to that co-worker who somehow keeps getting promoted, full of enthusiasm and promise, but no one can quite explain what they actually do. The crowd laughs, but beneath the humor, everyone knows he's hitting a nerve. If confidence translated into results, Tyrus quips, Kamala would already be president of the entire galaxy. The delivery is sharp, but never mean-spirited. It's pure observational comedy at its finest. Kamala might not win the narrative, but she certainly nails the performance, all energy, all rhythm, yet no clear melody. It's like watching a musical where everyone's singing, but nobody understands the lyrics. As Tyrus wraps up with his signature smirk, he offers one last jab. Kamala's leadership, he says, might just be revolutionary, not because it's effective, but because it's inspired millions of Americans to stay quiet out of sheer disbelief.
We applaud people speaking their mind. There's certainly plenty of celebrities who are saying outrageous things about Donald Trump. So if Mel Gibson wants to share his thoughts, I think everyone can accept that, but probably not Hollywood.
Mel bursts out laughing, nearly spilling his drink, but beneath the laughter lies a sharper truth. Between the punchlines, both he and Tyrus hit on something heavier. They mockingly suggest that American leadership has shifted from substance to showmanship, from genuine influence to well-rehearsed image. Hopeful slogans now echo against a backdrop of confusion and chaos, while the real question, what's the goal, seems long forgotten. They describe it as a kind of political hypnosis disguised as inspiration. And to them, Kamala isn't the root of the problem. She's just the symptom of a system that values performance over purpose and loudness over thought. Mel, the man who once embodied Braveheart, seems genuinely baffled that a country once known for courage and conviction now applauds calculated vagueness. At least my movies have editors, he mutters, shaking his head. Tyrus can't resist closing with a grin, noting that Washington has officially turned into Hollywood's parody, only less self-aware. Somewhere between comic relief and reluctant hero, Kamala Harris stands at the center of it all. playing both roles in a script no one seems to understand anymore.
Acting like we haven't known her for the last 4 years or 3. It feels like 50. It really does. It really does. And you could make, now they're making the argument the reason why she was the way she was because she had to lay in the cut so Biden could do his thing, and she had to watch it. And one day she decided to go down to him and say, "Hey, it's my time." And he's like, "You're right." He stepped aside. She's this great, noble person. And you know what? Let's say this is all true. I'm willing to have a restart with Kamala, a complete restart. Maybe
even if Kamala isn't laughing, the audience certainly is, because sometimes humor is the only way to cope with the absurdity of modern politics. And Tyrus and Mel, they weren't wrapping up, they were just warming up for round 2 of the roast. Imagine the world's longest running reality show, except no one ever wins. That's how they describe it, with Kamala Harris as the star of the grand illusion. She steps up to the microphone, flashing that trademark grin that seems to promise clarity, but what follows sounds more like a riddle written by a poet who's misplaced their thesaurus. Mel can't resist adding a final jab, his grin widening as he says, it's the kind of speech where every word sounds important, but the meaning disappears faster than campaign promises after Election Day.
First of all, she never saw the video.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not someone who describes a video.
Yeah.
That's someone that they handed this to her and she was like, elephants? I'll take it from here. And then she went out there. And she was not drunk. She was hungover, because she's way worse when she's hungover. That was hungover because she kept saying the same thing over and over again. They surrounded, and then they formed a circle. And then they got together.
Then Tyrus, never one to miss a punchline, jumps in with his trademark grin. He says Kamala has mastered what he calls linguistic jazz, words that sound smooth and rhythmic, but don't actually go anywhere. There's a beat, sure, but no melody. It grabs your attention, yet slips right through your fingers. It's mesmerizing in the same way a slow motion car crash is. You can't look away, even though you know exactly where it's headed. Mel chimes in, saying it reminds him of Hollywood's obsession with remakes, taking the same old idea, repackaging it, and selling it as something new. That, he jokes, seems to be Kamala's approach to speeches. Tyrus leans back, shaking his head. All smiles, no substance, he says. And by the time it's over, you're left unsure of what she was actually trying to say, but you definitely remember the laugh.
And every day, in the courtroom, I stood proudly before a judge, and I said 5 words. Kamala Harris for the people. I accept your nomination to be president of the United States of America.
I mean, some people have their head on straight, like Mel Gibson here. So he comes out and says this about Kamala Harris.
Mel points out that Kamala's entire political style feels like it was designed in a marketing boardroom, polished to perfection but stripped of anything real. That's it, he jokes. Someone watched The West Wing and decided that's what leadership looks like. He calls it government on Instagram, filtered, framed, captioned just right, and completely disconnected from the messy reality it's meant to represent. Then comes the real punch. Both Mel and Tyrus agree that Kamala's speeches aren't about genuine communication at all. They're about calibration, the careful fine-tuning of tone and image rather than substance. Laughing, they imagine her hosting a late-night show called The Vice Hour, where she tries to explain policy segment by segment. The tagline? Stay tuned, because, as they say with a smirk, no one really knows where any of it is going.
TMZ caught up with actor and filmmaker Mel Gibson, who reaffirmed his support for former President Donald Trump, and he had some sick burns for Vice President Kamala Harris. The reporter asked Gibson who he was going to vote for. After Gibson said that Kamala had the IQ of a fence post, demands were made for an immediate retraction and apology by the...
He admits that his frustration isn't really with Kamala herself, but with the system she represents, a culture that prizes charm over competence and slogans over skill. In that arena, Kamala reigns supreme, the undefeated champion of elegant confusion. Then, just to turn up the heat, Mel and Tyrus imagine what must be going through her head while she speaks. Mel acts it out, grinning. All right, deep breath. Move your hands. Sound passionate. Say something that feels important but can't be fact-checked. Smile, pause, and repeat. That's when Mel has a revelation. Leaders used to inspire people to act. Now, he says, the goal seems to be to keep the public guessing just long enough to avoid being called out. If that's true, he adds with a laugh, She's playing 4D chess while everyone else is still setting up the board. But beneath the humor, there's a flicker of seriousness. As they exchange knowing looks, both men acknowledge what their audience is starting to realize. This isn't just a roast of Kamala Harris, it's a roast of the entire political system that made her rise not only possible, but almost inevitable. Mel wraps it up with a sobering thought. Somewhere along the line, likability replaced leadership in politics. And despite her flaws, Kamala has perfected that version of the game. She's not crafting policy, she's performing it. The camera loves her, the crowd cheers, and even when her words falter, the energy carries the moment. In today's political theater, mood matters more than meaning. She's not aiming to persuade, she's aiming to be seen. The confusion is the message. The showmanship is the policy. Mel chuckles, shaking his head. In a world this upside down, he says, maybe she's the only one who actually understands how it works. By the end, it's not clear if Mel and Tyrus are mocking Kamala or diagnosing a national condition. Because in an age where every leader looks camera ready and every speech feels like an audition, maybe they weren't roasting her at all. Maybe they were holding up a mirror that America just didn't want to look into.